To begin with, this article is the 2021 and 2022 economic report and basically about government budgeting. It's discussed on the operating expenditures as well as development expenditures in 2022, which are expected to be higher in order to revitalize the economy. Malaysian federal government spending is expected to be higher in 2022 with operational expenditure of 233.5 billion ringgit Malaysia and development expenditure of 75.6 billion ringgit Malaysia, according to the MOF Fiscal Review 2023 report and Federal Government Revenue estimates issued on Friday, October 29. Furthermore, the remaining 23 billion ringgit Malaysia from the federal government's total budget is for production through the National COVID-19 Fund. In line with this article's topic, the federal government of Malaysia presents the Malaysian budget every year to outline government revenue and expenditures proposals, as well as forecast economic situations for the coming year and fiscal policies for the coming years. The national budget is a dynamic annual economic plan that promotes economic growth and income distribution in a stable financial condition. Before the start of the fiscal year, the Malaysian budget is normally presented the last quarter of the year between September and December. Budgets are also presented by all Malaysian states. Since the state finance are reliant on federal funds, state budgets are normally presented after the federal budget is presented.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is NORSIMAH NASIR and I will be presenting about the issue in this article. The first issue is the increase in the operating expenditure, which according to the Minister of Finance, the increase in operating expenditure is mainly due to the supplies and services and the debt service charges as well as the emoluments. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, last year's budget hit a high of 322.54 billion with a budgetary deficit of 6% of the country's GDP. The 2021 budget had four broad themes: caring for the people, steering the economic, sustainable living, and enhancing public service delivery. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic that is much more serious than the previous thought, these budgetary allocations of unprecedented scale has never been reflected in this year's economic growth. The Finance Minister has already pointed out the 2022 budget will focus on the recovery, rebuilding national resilience, and catalyzing reforms. First and foremost, the overall economy has to be restarted in 2022 while recovering livelihoods of the company and individuals. This is followed by the rebuilding in the economic sector, most heavily bruised by the pandemic so that they can continue to survive. And finally, through the catalyzing reform to extend the VERUS action plan under the 12th Malaysian Plan towards the Vision 2013. To simply put, recovery and rebuilding are the tremendous importance, while reformation is to achieve the nation's long-term objective. For so many years, the annual budget have set aside more than 70% of the fiscal allocations and government operating expenditure, including salaries and pension paid to the civil servant, as well as compositions of the 332.5 billion set aside for 2021 budget. Only the 65 billion was for development expenditure. Judging from the way the government now handle the pandemic, it is highly unlikely that another lockdown will be imposed. When the operation of the companies are fully restored, the need for financial assistance for companies and individuals will be significantly lessened. Other than allocations set aside to fight the pandemic and sustain the expenses of the medical care and public healthcare sector, the 2022 budget should be focused more on the investing in the country's economic recovery instead of providing life-saving handouts to the rakyat. Over the past 2 years, the government has spent too much on providing financial assistance to the company, and the individuals, which will not have much positive effect on the country economy recovery. As a result, some of the companies that urgently require a hand from the government have remained shut out, while the major public infrastructural projects are stalled, triggering the chain reaction of this tech development. Triggering the chain reactions of this stagnant development and the shrinking of the economy into the vicious cycle of the corporate closure. It is anticipated that the total allocations for the new budget will be exceed last year's 332.5 billion, that hopefully will be more than 70 billion for development expenditure. Malaysia Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob should wisely distribute the allocation during such difficult time for recovery, rebuilding and reform instead of dumping too much money to save lives and help the poor. Perhaps not more than 20% of the 70 billion could be used for the purpose of financial assistance once the economy is fully reopened, so that the corporate sector gets to compete freely once again and let the market mechanism determine the survival of individual companies. The government must be decisive in offering more target financial assistance industry such as tourism, aviation, hospitality, transportation and the service, which make up some 56% of the country's GDP, must never be neglected.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Doreen VERUS will continue presenting the next issue. The next issue of this article was the increased development expenditure allocation will mainly be used for implementing the 12 MP's programs and projects. It is including the Gemas Johor Bahru electrified double tracking project, as well as Malaysia-Singapore Rapid Transit System Link and Pan-Borneo Highway projects. The Gemas Johor Bahru Electrified Double Tracking Project, or GJBEDTP, is a project to build a double-track electric rail line between Gemas Negeri Sembilan and Johor Bahru, Johor, in Malaysia's Sultan Age. It is the third phase of the Malaysian Ministry of Transport Electrified Double Tracking Project, EDTP, which would provide a continuous double track line across Malaysia from Padang Besar near Thai border to Johor Bahru near Singapore. The GJBEDTP intends to increase the rail infrastructure quality, improve passenger train services, and improve rail safety for operations. The project entails the upgrade and construction of a 192-kilometer double-track electric rail line, as well as the construction of new passenger stations, rolling stock depots, yards, underpasses and bridges, as well as the installation of signaling and communication systems, as well as the remodeling and renovation 11 intermediate stations. The project anticipated cost was 9.5 Malaysian ringgit billion, or US 2.26 billion as of June 2020, including 400 million Malaysian ringgit for coaches and staff housing and 200 million Malaysian ringgit for consultancy expenses. The federal government budget cover whole cost of this project. The project was initially proposed under the Mahathir government in early 2000s, but it was finally implemented in 2018. The government reported in June 2022 that 60% of the project had been finished. Then the project is expected to be completed in this October 2022. Other than that, the Pan-Borneo Highway projects has a long and storied history. However, the end is now in sight more than a half a year later. The roadway is currently 82% complete, according to Senior Work Minister Dato Seri Fadila Yusof, and it is expected to be completed within the next 5 years. There are 4 sections completed, which are the Teluk Melano Sematan, Nyabau, Serian to Balai Ringin, and Julau parts have all been finished. The remaining packages will be done before the end of this year. We only expect 1 or 2 packages to be delayed as a result of the challenges. Particularly, the paucity of the building supplies and the growing costs are the challenges facing by the contractors and also the construction side. Furthermore, the contractors also are struggling with rising gasoline and steel prices, as well as a workforce shortage in Sarawak, which exclusively hires foreign employees from neighbor countries. The project cost 16.117 billion Malaysian ringgit for only the Pan Borneo Sarawak Highway project, which also includes the 11 construction packages and 786 km road from Teluk Melano to Lawas, with the second phase of Limbang to Lawas projected to be complete by 2028, as the Senior Works Minister Dato Seri Fadila Yusof said. Moreover, the government will allocate Malaysian ringgit 23 billion for stimulus and economic recovery measures, with the highest ceiling for the COVID-19 fund, according to the MOF, which stated the fund revised estimate for 2021 was Malaysian ringgit 39 billion. It said 2022 will be the final year for the COVID-19 fund. Entire demand is expected to be about Malaysian ringgit 100 billion, even below the Malaysian ringgit 110 billion allowed ceiling.
Now we are going to the next part, which are the theory. The theory that we found in this newspaper cutting is public expenditure. Public expenditure is defined as spending by a country government on communal needs and desires such as pensions, provision for education, healthcare and housing, security, infrastructure and so on. On the other hand, public expenditure is separated into 2 categories, which are government operating expenditure and government development expenditure. But in this part, I will focus on the development expenditure. Development expenditure refers to the government spending that aids in economic growth by boosting the country production and real income. Development expenditure on revenue is separated into 2 categories, which are development expenditure on revenue and development expenditure on capital. Development expenditure is critical to the prosperity of the country. This spending is for the expenses of constructing infrastructure that will offer long-term public goods such as roads, hospitals, schools and airports. Moreover, development expenditure refers to government expenditure on national development. For example, the expenses of building schools, homes and hospitals. According to the newspaper cutting, to revitalize the economy, the government need to have a higher development expenditure. As stated by the Ministry of Finance, total expenditure is expected to be higher in 2022 at RM332.1 billion due to greater operational expenditure of RM233.5 billion and development expenditure of RM75.6 billion. This is consistent with the government promise to offer enough economic support to reinvigorate the domestic economy, which is dealing with the burden of COVID-19 driven mobility restriction aimed at containing the pandemic spread. This means that by increasing the development expenditure, it can help the government to revitalize the economy after the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the increased development expenditure funding will be primarily used to undertake program and projects under 12 MP, such as the Gemas Johor Bahru Electrified Double Vehicle Tracking Project, as well as the Malaysian-Singapore Rapid Transit System Connection and Pan-Borneo Highway projects, according to the Ministry of Finance. In the article, stated that by increasing the development expenditure will help to strengthen the economy. That's all. Now I will pass to the next presenter.
Now we move to operating expenditure, which is it can be defined as expenditure experienced by the government to pay the cost of managing and administering the country. According to Minister of Finance, the increase of operating expenditure is mainly due to supplies and service, debt service charge, as well as emolument. This increase of cost is to support the function of the government towards their operation, because during this pandemic of the COVID-19, the government need to increase their operation in order to curb the issue of this pandemic, because the arising of the pandemic give impact towards the majority of the society that lead to government to increase the public expenditure in order to ensure that the government capable to control and provide needs to the society. As we all know, 70% revenue of the government is come from the society through collecting taxes from the people, which as return, they will receive benefits of public service. This is the reason why the government need to expend their money for the people, as it is to ensure that the government can be able to protect the welfare of the people, as well as able to give quality of life to them as they deserve. Other than that, the emolument also increased as the government need to pay for the public servants that has served the people during the pandemic, because they are the body that put much effort in protecting and serve the public people for most of the time. Therefore, during facing with the COVID-19 crisis, the government need to spend more in order to ensure that the government body can able to run in their activity, as well as able to serve the people that affected. Now, we move to suggestion. To be known, the government also need to control the expenses in order to ensure there is no issue of overspending. How to control? This issue can be controlled by implementing the medium-term fiscal framework as a guide in creating strategies for a 3 to 5 year medium-term fiscal consolidation in line with the 12 Malaysian Plan. What is medium-term fiscal framework? It is a fiscal arrangement that allow the government to extend the fiscal policy horizon beyond the yearly financial cycle. To be more clear, this medium-term fiscal framework will guide the fiscal strategy of the country in the medium term, where this medium-term fiscal framework serves as a guide for budgetary planning by setting a 3-year macro-fiscal projection including revenue and expenditure. Why it needs to be implemented? This is because medium-term fiscal framework is the important tools for public finance management and operation to promote fiscal discipline, to ensure effective as well as efficient spending, and embark on institutional reforms. If there is no control in public expenditure, it will arise fiscal deficit, where it will give impact towards the growth of economy, cost of production, and inflation due to condition where when the expenditure of the government exceed its revenue. Therefore, it can help with monitoring by giving standard against which budgetary changes can be measured over time.
Supplies and services, debt service payment, and emoluments all contribute to the growth in operational expenditure. Meanwhile, according to the Ministry of Finance, the increase of development expenditure allocation would be used to undertake programs and projects under the 12 MP, such as the Gemas Johor Bahru Electric Double Track Project, the Malaysia-Singapore High-Speed Transit System Network, and the Pan-Borneo Highway Project. The government plans to spend 23 billion ringgit Malaysia on economic stimulation and recovery. What's more encouraging is that the Malaysian economy is expected to develop at a rate of 5.5% to 6.5%